You may think that threat modeling is a boring compliance exercise, and in some cases, you might be right. But what if we could make it far more effective by making it fun? Threat modeling is a process to identify and remediate to threats. The FDA requires it, the EU encourages it. Overall, it's important. But sometimes it can feel like a regulatory burden that slows down innovation and create resistance amongst team members. Our guest, Christoph Niehoff, has contributed to this change in perspective by creating a card game that transformed compliance tick boxing into engaging competition. In this video, we'll discover how a deck of colorful cards break down hierarchical barriers, bridging communication gap between junior developers and CTOs, hardware engineers and software developers, and technical experts with business leaders, all while making security a collaborative adventure rather than a burdensome obligation.
Christoph, welcome to Medical Device Cybersecurity Podcast.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you very much for having me on the show. I'm quite excited to be here.
It's a pleasure. Christoph, can you tell us a bit more about how you started threat modeling and what was your background on that?
Yeah, actually, I have a totally different background because actually by training, I'm a physicist. So I studied physics and I did particle physics. And what I actually learned is thinking about new physics and what the Large Hadron Collider can tell us about that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but then, almost like 7 or 8 years ago, I kind of changed things and went into software development. And currently I'm a senior consultant at TNG Technology Consulting. We build software for customers in all different industries. We also created a threat modeling card game. I also mentioned that. And we put this under the OWASP umbrella. And I'm now the project lead of this card.
Oh, wow. Outstanding. Before we go any further, can you just remind us why threat modeling helps us build more secure devices?
Yeah, let's start a little bit earlier and maybe talk about what's usually the problem with security processes in corporation, because that's something I quite frequently have to deal with. And I think I often see two problems. One is like missing management support, and the other one is the big image problem of security.
Oh, tell me about it. What is the big image problem of security and big?
I often worked with these heavy compliance things where a development team gets like one Excel file with literally hundreds of different security questions they have to check off.
Yeah.
And then they're left alone with that because the security team itself doesn't have enough resources and they can't really explain what they mean with that. And then everyone is frustrated because the security team doesn't get any feedback as quickly as they want. And the developers are overwhelmed with all these security questions and all these unclear requirements, I would say.
Yeah.
Yes. And in the end, it feels like just a compliance checklist thing that people
like we did threat modeling, we like leave us alone, or how do you see this happening?
Because what I like in the threat modeling manifesto is the idea, if you read the threat modeling manifesto, one of these values is a culture of finding and fixing security problems is more important than checkbox compliance. And this tells what matters. It's building secure products. And this, I think, goes very well along with the ideas of DevOps. And I think threat modeling in itself is a very good framework for developers to learn security and to be helped to build better security into their project.
Okay, wonderful. Christoph, can you walk us through the steps that are defined in threat modeling?
Yeah, I think you had it on the episode with Adam. So Adam defined threat modeling as a series of 4 questions. So you first have to understand what your system is that you're building. And it can be anything. It can be like a web shop. It can be like a cloud infrastructure. It could be like one medical device embedded into a big IoT system or whatever. But you first have to understand that, and you have to know what are the use cases, what are the different actors, and how does everything work together. And this by itself is not so easy as it sounds, but it's very important because that gives you the basis of analyzing and understanding your system. And then comes the next question, and this is what can go wrong. And this is at the core of threat modeling, and that's also mostly the tricky part, especially if we want to do threat modeling in that way that it's not a security people thing, but a developer thing. So we have to bring developers in to threat modeling such that they can answer the question, what can go wrong? And that is where I think most of these threat modeling frameworks try to help the developers. And maybe Stride or maybe these card games that we're going to talk about, or other frameworks. They want to give the developers a little bit help and take them by the hand in answering these questions of what can go wrong.
Got it.
Yeah.
So after what can go wrong, what's next in the process?
Yeah. After you identified possible issues and possible threats there could be, you have to analyze them. You have to understand them. You have to define mitigations, for example. And you have to, put some price tag next to them, I would say. Maybe not price tag, but some kind of prioritization. And this is usually like a risk-based. If it's high severity, if it's low, what's the impact? What are the consequences? And how likely is it that someone might...
Got it. Okay. And the last one is, did we do a good job? Right?
Yeah. This is the retrospective, I would say. This is more like a high-level thing to have a look at your own process and understand, is that what we are doing? Does it work for us? Does it deliver value for us? And if not, what do we want to do to change that? How do we make our process better? And also, do we keep up with the development of our software? Because in software development and also in IT product development, and I would count medical devices at some degree into that category. It's not like you build one thing and then you're done. It's constantly evolving, and you have to define a process that keeps up with the changes of your product over time.
Okay, let's see. Yeah, it's what the fundamentals of threat modeling, always like asking questions. What can we do better? What are our top risks, and how do we prioritize amongst those?
Yeah.
Christoph, you built a game, which is very interesting because you don't often associate risk management to having fun, which is what games are sometimes about. Can you tell us how this idea came to you of building a game to help people threat model?
Yeah, so first I have to say it was not my idea. It's an idea that was also already like 15 years ago from Adam Shostak, and he had the idea of bringing gamification into threat. And yeah, so we tried that. So he built this game, Elevation of Privilege, and we actually liked it very much. And it really helped us, and I think it produced a lot of value to us when we built software. But at the same time, we also felt that it's not the 100% perfect match for our use case, because we often bring developers in that are not trained as software developers. I mean, have a look at myself. I'm a physicist, so we often bring other people into the software development realm. And so onboarding is an important topic. And for this, we had the feeling that elevation of privilege is a little bit too much security oriented and not so much developer oriented. Yeah, sometimes it's a little bit too abstract. It implies a little bit knowledge that maybe is there for security people, but for people not new in the field, it requires a lot of explaining upfront to sometimes understand what this card means. And yeah, as I said, the game itself is wonderful, and if you know how to use it, it's really good. But just for people new from university, I sometimes felt that we might need something that gives a little bit more help, but is a little bit more specific to the development that we are doing. And And then we looked around, and OWASP has a very similar card game. It's called Cornucopia, which is actually really nice because it focuses on web applications alone. And by that, it uses a language which is very much nearer to the language that software developers use. So just the wording itself helps. And yeah, we used that, but then we saw, okay, that's only application security. But we often do, when we do DevOps, for example, there's also like infrastructure at all these sites. And then we had the idea, okay, we build a game for infrastructure, for cloud structures, and yeah, for the ops side of that.
I see. So there's different games, serve different audiences, different specific purposes.
Yeah.
Now, Christoph, out of pure curiosity, I have this question where when you come into a company with a set of cards and you start telling people, this is how we're going to make your device or your software secure, what are the typical reactions that you get?
It depends. So there are the companies that are already quite security aware, that really like the idea, and that immediately understand the value that gamification brings into the threat modeling process, because they also make these experiences that these heavyweight compliance-like processes don't really work. And they like the idea of bringing, well, this new, fresh wind of gamification into the developers. But yeah, there are also other companies that are kind of, well, take a step back and say, okay, this just should I pay my developers for playing a game?
Yeah.
Yeah. But then you can always say that in the end, these card games are like a threat catalog just in the disguise of a card game. So you can always argue that you can see it as one of these classical approaches if you just, at the moment, just forget that it's a game.
Yeah, I see. And that's the whole point of it. You talk about the benefits of gamification. What are some of the benefits you've seen from gamifying threat modeling?
I mean, as soon as I enter the room and I have card games in my hand, people act differently. So if I do like a threat modeling training and introduce this into a team, I often see that there are developers and also junior developers, and the CTO, for example, is sitting next to them, and they are playing the game, and they are starting to discuss, and everyone has an idea, and it works actually good. And also the junior people, they participate and they tell their opinion, and that works. And I think if the story would be different, if there was the CTO and the developers, and he was making a presentation and have an Excel sheet there, and he was asking, okay, did you do this? Did you? And that. And it checks this up. I think this would be a very different experience. Also, the dynamic between the people would be different.
Yeah. It kind of like evens out the playing field on all levels. The CTO and the developers play on the same. And I think also there's this culture thing where you accept that you make mistakes in games and it's okay, and then you can recover and you learn from it. So and all of a sudden, you as a consultant, Christoph, maybe you can tell from your perspective, but you no longer come as an auditor or someone that's going to put people in trouble. You're introducing them to something that's fun, that's different, and maybe they don't put as much pressure on themselves to say the right answers.
Yeah. I mean, it's not about giving the right answers. I think one of the most important things that threat modeling gives to development teams is that it creates some kind of theme or some place where they can talk to each other, and just it's a lot about knowledge transfer and exchanging experiences, and someone always comes up with an anecdote of how they did it in the prior company or these things. And these are the valuable things, that this information is shared, that also junior people know the importance of these security topics. And this educational aspect of threat modeling, I think this is very important. And yeah, gamification helps a lot of that. we've learned from educational psychology that gamification helps to increase like intrinsic motivation because it's associated with kind of fun in your brain, and then you want to do that. And I think it's a brilliant thing to teach developers this kind of security mindset. And there's always this question in your head, okay, now I'm implementing something, I'm building something. Is it good? And what can go wrong if I build that? Always asking this question in the back of your head. This is kind of a mindset. And I think this is something incredibly valuable if you build software. And teaching this is, I think, one of the big advantages that gamification.
Absolutely. Yeah. Curiosity. Can you tell us a bit more about the game, Christoph? Tell us about the rules, how it works.
So maybe people know elevation of privilege, then I can just say it's exactly the same rules. But if you don't do, maybe I just show you some of the cards. So you have, let's do it like this. So we have a lot of cards.
Different colors.
Yeah, different colors. Yeah, so each color is a different suit. So we have like 5 suits. So the red ones are secrets and access. So everything that is related to identity access management and secret management and permissions and these things. Blue is delivery. So everything with connected to bringing your product on the street.
Okay.
Then we have cards, the green ones that are connected to recovery. So if something happens, how do you get back to a functioning stack? Yellow is about monitoring, so understanding the current state. And the purple ones are like everything that didn't fit into the other categories. It's about what we call it resources. And then the idea is that on each card, I don't think you can read it very well. On each card, there is one concrete attack vector written down. For example, here, if you can't read it, it means it says that we don't control egress traffic, so outgoing traffic. And then, someone plays a card, and then the whole team starts to brainstorm whether this particular attack, so the egress, is somewhere applicable within the system, the product that one's building. So it is a brainstorming starter to think about where these attacks apply to a system and where this problem could pop up.
I see. And about the rules, all 5 categories will point to a certain attack path that an attacker can take. Do you play them sequentially? So you start out perhaps with one vector and then end with the general questions, or how does it work?
Yeah, the gameplay, it's an American card game called Spades, but it's very similar to card games that are also there in Europe. So you start with one suit, so with one color, and then it's a trick-taking game. So all the players in the round have to follow the leading suit. So within each round, you tend to stay within one cluster of attack vectors. I would say so. If you start with the purple cards, the next player has to play a purple card. And the idea is that the one who plays the highest card wins the trick. And it's also like this, that the higher the card is, the more severe the threat might be. And then if you cannot play a card in that particular suit, you can play any card. And then there's one trump suit. This is the red cards in our case. And if you play that, you can also win the trick.
Oh wow. Okay, so there's 2 sides, right? First you play a card and you have a discussion, and then there's the who wins the most points by playing the highest card or the red card.
Yeah, so there are kind of like 2 strategies of making points. The first one is playing higher cards, so thinking about the most severe threats first. And the other way is that each time you identify a threat or a possibility of an issue, you write it down, and for that you get it. So finding security problems gives you points, and playing high cards.
Okay, wow. That's really interesting. And Christoph, is this game a one-time thing? Do you play it once, or do you play it multiple times a month, multiple times a year? How have you seen it happen?
I think it's definitely not a one-time thing, because when we just discussed this fourth question, this how do we keep track of the development of the software? It just means that you need a security process which is continuous. And the idea is to have a continuous threat modeling process, and there are different ways to do that. Either you play these card games regularly, like every 2 weeks or so, and then I would highly recommend to not only play this game, but also switch it and use reservation privilege ones and make a mixture of to get these different aspects of the security question of the attack.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, and then I've seen different approaches to do that, because it highly depends on what's the workflow of the teams. So we have a lot of teams that play these card games like every 2 or 3 weeks, and then they get a feedback out of that, and then they build that into their software, and that's the usual case, I would say. But then we also have teams, well, especially when they don't get too much management support and don't have the resources to invest like 1 hour every 2 weeks or so. They need like a more lightweight thing to do. And one thing I think at least one of our teams does is they ignore the game mechanics of the game and just draw a random card. And they committed to, in front of each planning meeting, so every 1 or 2 weeks, we at least commit to using like 10 minutes to draw like 1 or 2 or 3 random.
That's very interesting. And then you can, from there, you can maybe expand and then shows how beneficial it is, and maybe play a full deck of cards eventually.
Yes, that's the idea.
Okay. And have you seen drawbacks from using such cards to teach and apply threat modeling?
One drawback that's usually there is that when you start this game, you usually don't play it until the end. Because, I mean, it's like, I think it's 63 cards in this game, and if you want to discuss everything within 1.5 hours or 90 minutes or whatever, it doesn't work. But it's also kind of on purpose, because this gives you motivation to continue the game.
Yeah.
But I think this, some people at least experience as a drawback, because they might expect more reward in the sense that they want to be the extreme winner of the game.
Oh, the champion. I'd definitely be one of these competitive players wanting like, all right, who wins? I mean, it's really cool. The one thing that it makes me think though is playing a game is really cool. You take notes. Then after this meeting is over, how do you make sure that the learnings, the conversations that you've had with your fellow players turn into actionable insights and value for security of the product?
Yeah, I mean, these card games, they mostly tackle the second question of the 4-question framework. So what can go wrong? And behind that, as a downstream task, you have to do the other parts of threat modeling. So there has to be some process that someone, an architect, a product owner, whoever, should take the responsibility of work with the pile of sticky notes that you get out of this assessment. And I mean, this knowledge sharing, it's kind of implicit, because you just do it while you play. And that, in my experience, works pretty well. But in the end, you need someone to think about the consequences and analyze that, and someone has to assign some kind of risk, such that these security issues, they always have to compete with the features that are built. That's I think one of the big problems of security, that security always has to fight with usual features.
Yes.
And therefore, someone has to calculate the risk and to get the standing to say, okay, this is more important than building the new button on the website.
I see. Okay. Yeah, I mean, one way I could see it work is maybe that's how you've implemented it, is you have maybe groups of 6, and then every other week you'll have a pair of these group of 6 that has to take notes of everything and be the ones to develop this and think about implementing it in the next 2 weeks. Is that something you've recommended, or what usually was your approach to this?
Could be. I mean, we have one team that did the modeling in a similar way, where they knew, okay, we have a big system and there's no chance that we can all understand this and do a big diagram of this. So they split up into smaller groups, and they say, okay, next week, the two of you will draw a diagram and explain this part of the system for us. And then the next team, and the next team, and the next team. And so they made these groups to understanding the system.
Oh wow, makes sense. That's a pretty smart way of doing this. And who are usually the team members that you find more engaged, and who are the ones that you found a little bit maybe having a difficult time, or are they all having a good time and contributing to the project?
Yeah, it depends a little bit on the atmosphere and how people are willing to discuss within the groups. But usually I like to have different perspectives in threat modeling. Not only need the technical perspective of the developers, that's really important, and because they know the details of the system, but that's not everything. So you also need like people from the business side to understand the use cases, and also UX, for example, because you always have this balance between usability and security, and you have to find some compromises, because otherwise, what's the best and the securest system good for if no one can use it? Because
That's true.
they will just build workarounds. And so all these different perspectives are important. And it's also important that everyone can say their opinion. If there's a group like 5 hardcore developers who want to do security, and there's only this one small person who wants to fight for usability, one has to make sure so there often has to be a moderator to make sure that also this person can say his opinion.
And this moderator is usually a security person, I'm assuming?
Not really. I mean, sometimes it's me in our setup, but it doesn't have to be a security person. This is more like really like moderation skill. It's not about security.
Yeah, just kind of letting people speak and everything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's really interesting as well, because I think another use of it, and taking it more to global threat modeling, is that it also shows people who are in the business side the value of security and the questions that we're asking ourselves. And not only they'll see it, but they'll be actors in it by sharing ideas and listening to the conversations that are happening around a deck of cards. So it's very interesting to see. So Christoph, maybe we can switch to, this is the Medical Device Cybersecurity Podcast. Have you had any interactions in medical devices or in healthcare environments, and what were the benefits and noticeable sides that you saw to this kind of development?
So currently I'm working for a manufacturer of clinical management software, I would say. I've also once been into an IoT platform. And in the end, I think that the ideas of building medical devices that are connected within a hospital are kind of similar.
Yeah.
Namely that I think there are different peoples that build firmware for devices, but that's not everything, because they have to be embedded into some network, and they have to be something like a back end. So there always has to be like a software side to do that, because the devices have to be embedded into the thing that's working with the device.
Yeah.
And I think bringing these both worlds together, device people and software infrastructure, however you want to call it, people, is very important, because they have to find a language to talk to each other. They have to define like security contracts, because they're interfaces of exchanging information. And for this, I think threat modeling is a good way to bring them together, to start them talking and discuss these questions. Because at least what I've seen is that both worlds have a bit of a different mindset between C programmers and cloud people, for example. It's a different mindset, and you have to bring them to the table and discuss security relevant topics.
Okay. I mean, that's very significant. I agree. There's more challenges in IoT and medical devices to connect the different pieces because there's so many moving parts.
Yeah.
And I think getting people together around the table and working on the same problem together and having a little bit of competition with the points is a great way to make it insightful and entertaining. So let's say if we have a medical device manufacturer and they're like, wow, this is cool. I want to implement threat modeling and specifically use this deck of cards as a way to improve my threat modeling process. Where do you think they should start?
We have this as an OWASP project on the OWASP website, so you can just Google it, OWASP Cumulus. I think I didn't say the name yet. So it's OWASP Cumulus, like the Cumulus clouds. And you can find, I think, most of the information there. And yeah, from there, as a starting point, you can either reach out to me, because my email address is on there, or you can also read the books of Adam Shostak, because I really like them, because they tell you all about these threat modeling ideas and about what the games can do. And Cumulus is just, well, as I said, it's exactly the same rules. So what you read about the elevation of privilege just matches to Cumulus. And yeah, and we also have an online version. So if you're like in a distributed team, you can also play that. And I would just say, well, try it out. Yeah, just do it. And threat modeling is a lot about doing and not so much about talking about it. So what we are doing right now this is more about doing and start with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just start and then see where it goes. I think what I've seen from Adam is a lot of just do it, and then it doesn't have to be perfect. Just do it, and then you'll see how it moves, adapt it to organization.
Right,
it'll be good.
I totally agree, because also threat modeling, well, it's about getting results, and it's not about getting the one perfect result. And I think I like to think about in this 80-20 way of thinking that you don't have to understand this one specific attack vector, but you have to understand the whole big thing. And therefore, you shouldn't go deep, you should go broad. And I think their 80-20 way of thinking helps.
Okay, wow. Just tackling many issues and then afterwards maybe digging into it deeper outside of the game and just starting conversations. It's a great way to ignite some thoughts.
Yeah. So you shouldn't limit yourself into this one attack vector, but there's more to it. There's the whole picture, and maybe there are several attack vectors that work together in a real attack. So you have to get an overview about that and not limit yourself into this one concrete problem, because that also might be interesting, but it's about getting this broad view of the security posture of your system.
Absolutely. Great. Well, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast, Christoph. If people want to find out more about you and what you do, where can they go?
Yeah, I think the easiest way would be to just Google OWASP Cumulus. There you can find the game, then you get the links to my email. You can just email me if they have any questions. I think that's the easiest way.
Perfect. And we'll have the link in the description. Well, thanks again, Christoph, and we'll see you another time.
Thank you for having me on the show. It was a pleasure.
You've heard how threat modeling can change from a boring checkbox exercise to an engaging game. But what are the major takeaways? First, gamification works wonders for security. OWASP Cumulus turns formal threat assessments into collaborative adventures where CTOs and junior developers speak the same language. There's no more security as a department of no. Instead, it becomes a team sport where everyone wants to play. Second, medical device cybersecurity demands diverse viewpoints. When hardware engineers, software developers, and business stakeholders gather around these colorful cards, magic happens. Security isn't just about technical controls, it's about balancing protection and usability with business needs. Finally, security isn't a one-time event. Whether you want to play a game bi-weekly or just draw a couple of cards before a meeting. The key is making threat thinking part of your DNA. Remember the 80-20 rule. You don't need perfect security everywhere. You just need to understand your overall risk landscape. So grab some cards, gather your cross-functional teams, and make security an ongoing conversation. Your products and your patients Well, thank you. If you found today's gamification approach intriguing, don't miss our interview with Adam Shostak, the pioneer of threat modeling who helped create the medical device threat modeling playbook. Our conversation offers the essential frameworks and general guidelines that complement the hands-on card game techniques we'll explore today. I'll see you there.